It's now my real honor to introduce someone who has been a friend since he first started criticizing my work several years ago when I worked for another organization. Raj Patel is not only a good rabble-rouser and provocateur, but a deep thinker and doer. I'm so grateful for his knowledge and his humor and his commitment to really making the world a better place. Raj has many roles: activist, filmmaker, author, researcher, and professor. He is currently a research professor at the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, Austin, and a senior research associate at the Unit for Humanities at Rhodes University in South Africa. He has lived and worked all over the world and will be releasing a documentary on the food system later this year entitled Generation Food. I've seen a few clips of this film, and it's thought-provoking, inspirational, and a real call to action. I would expect nothing less from Raj and his co-conspirators. I couldn't be happier to have him here. I hope you ask him during the breaks and at lunch lots of questions. He's amazing. Please help me welcome Raj Patel to the stage.
Good morning. So I've got just a few minutes. What I'd love to talk to you about is the food system. Just all of it. Because I mean, often we think that the food system is this sort of long chain of exploitation that starts in the homes of farm workers and their families and stretches through the farmhouse to the farm gate and thence through supply routes to distributors and processors and retailers and fast food places. Wherever there are hands that touch our food before it reaches our plates, there is exploitation, and that's been fought for millennia. And certainly production is part of the modern food system, but it's not the only part. The food system is part of a way that we order society. And so the food system doesn't just make food, it makes things you can't eat. It makes things like beliefs and perceptions and expectations. And one of the most subtle and sophisticated and powerful things that the food system makes is you. Now, here's an example. Who here has, at any point in their lives, found themselves in a supermarket aisle, surrounded by food, confused about what to eat? There we are, most of you. This isn't surprising. This is actually a product of the food system. That you, the bewildered consumer, is something that the food system has made through a deluge of nutritional information. Now, luckily, the food system also has its own priesthood. I am, among other things, a professor of nutrition at the University of Texas at Austin. And so I get to see up close the vast amount of learning and effort that is put into coming up with new kinds of information to help us make sensible choices about our food. But when that information comes out, that just contributes to this huge level of informational noise. And again, the idea of the nutritional expert telling the bewildered consumer what to do, that's old as well. That's been going on since George Cheney, the British nutritionist, put out his bestseller called The English Malady, which was a guide to fighting obesity in England. And that came out in 1733. And so this idea of nutritional noise and bewilderment is old. And so it's not surprising that because it's been going on for so long, there is so much confusion. British children, for example, are baffled, poor things. I mean, 1 in 3 British kids doesn't know that bacon comes from pork. 92% of Australian children don't believe that bananas are plants. And you may think, well, you can't blame the children. We should blame their parents. That's certainly true. That, I mean, in Britain, 1 in 3 adults doesn't believe that apples come from England, even though they've been part of British agriculture since the Romans. And so the question is, well, how do you fix that? My director on the Generation Food Project, Steve James, he did Hoop Dreams. He and I have been following social movements around the world, looking at how you might engage in sort of systemic change, systemic thinking. One of the stories that we've been really inspired by is in Brazil. Brazil is home to the MST, the Landless Rural Workers Movement, who have resettled over 1 million people through their militancy on farms where people are now growing food agroecologically often, and they're thriving. The trouble is that the MST found that resettling and moving into farms isn't the end of the story. They needed to breach the silos of agriculture and come up with new alliances. And so one of the amazing things that the MST has done is work with nutritionists and educators and the government to come up with this amazing school meal program where 30% of food eaten by Brazilian school children in schools comes from local farms. And farmers are paid 30% more if it's grown agroecologically. But that's not the only way in which you can connect to your food and understand it better. These alliances expand beyond that. So, for example, there's a quasi-governmental organization in Brazil tasked with protecting the rights of children. And what they've suggested is we need to ban the marketing of everything to children. Ban all marketing to children. And I mean, in a sense, of course, that's fairly sensible. I mean, marketing, the economic rationale for marketing is that you're providing information for rational consumers to make informed choices. But we all agree that children aren't rational. We don't let them vote. I mean, even in Texas, we don't let them have guns. And yet, we bombard. I mean, at the moment in the United States, we, in 2009, according to the FCC, spent $1.79 billion educating or miseducating our children. $1.79 billion was spent on marketing to children. And I think that if we're interested in refashioning the food system, we need to move away from creating generations of consumers. I mean, we all agree that, yes, you may be a consumer, but you're also a parent and a member of a community and a thinking, political, social animal. But if so much of our time is spent overloaded by nutritional misinformation, then how can I, as a parent, for example, make sure that my kids are making the right kind of choice when billions of dollars are spent telling my kids, or miseducating my kids about what to eat? I want to take responsibility for my children. Let me do that. I want to be able to help my kids avoid the scourge that all American children face. 1 in 3 American kids will develop type 2 diabetes. 1 in 2 kids of parents of color will develop type 2 diabetes. I want to save my children from that. And the only way that I can do that is if I'm free to do that. But that means refashioning the food system, not spinning out consumers who are going to go after the latest sort of bauble in marketing, but instead people who are connected to their farmers and their farm workers, who understand where their food comes from. But that's a big ask. That's a systemic change. But that kind of systemic thinking that joins the dots between farming and consumerism and the capitalist food system, well, we need to be making the alliances that can help us think and dream our way to a food system where everyone can not only eat well, but can be connected to their food in ways that allow everyone to thrive. Thanks very much indeed.